Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of In Pursuit of a Parlay, Season 2, Episode 3. Last week, we talked about the return of college football, but what we saw in Week 0 was really nothing more than a prelude to the games that matter. Not knocking anyone who took the field last week, but real college football starts this weekend. We've got a handful of top 25 matchups. We've got a couple of really good games on the schedule, and I'm excited to dig right into it. So let's do it. Welcome to In Pursuit of a Parlay. If you haven't been watching before, we're going to go through 8 games. We're going to give you some lines, either against the spread or the money line, sometimes the over/under. We're going to come up with the best parlay we can to win the most money possible. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Feel free to comment below. If you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast, subscribe, comment, rate, review, do all of that good stuff. Get in touch. Let's make this a conversation and let me know what you want to see in the future. What I want to do right now is get to Game 1. I'm excited. We're going to start right here. North Carolina State, East Carolina. That is going to be at noon on Saturday. We're showing that North Carolina is going to win this one about 74% of the time. No big shock there. This is not the premier matchup of the week, but we do want to hit as many top 25 games as we can in here. NC State is led by a player who needs to be watched, needs to be paid attention to, quarterback Devin Leary. This is a guy who has a chance to ascend up draft boards this year. As a sophomore last season, he was borderline sensational. The jump that he took from to redshirt freshman to sophomore, spectacular. Jumps up to 65.7% completion percentage along with 3,433 yards passing, 35 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. And the guy is not just dinking and dunking, he's throwing the ball downfield. 7-1 touchdown to interception. Yeah, Devin Leary is a guy to pay attention to. He's a sleeper for the Heisman if this team does well. Probably not going to be that good, spoiler. But he's also a guy who we could potentially be talking about as a first-round pick come April 2023 and the NFL Draft. For ECU, we're talking about a team that relies on its offense. They had the 4th best offense in the American last year, averaging 433.2 yards per game. They did lose some stuff, though. Their best offensive player at this point is probably sophomore running back Keaton Mitchell, who had a very strong freshman season for the squad. Last year, 174 carries for 1,132 yards, 9 touchdowns, along with 88 yards. Also caught 22 passes for 253 yards. So, with all of that said, I just don't think ECU has enough. We're showing that NC State's going to cover this one about 76% of the time. This line has moved a little bit. Originally started NC State -10, has jumped down all the way to -11.5 at bovadasportsbook.com right now. And that seems like we can pay attention to the way that is trending. We're going to take... I don't want to just jump into money lines, right? I want to win you guys as much money as possible. I feel like a cover is certainly possible here. So our first pick will be NC State, number 13 team in the country, -11.5 for -115 at Bovada over East Carolina. And we are going to move on from there. Pretty easy first game, but it's going to be a good first game. I'm really excited about this weekend of college football. The next game we're going to hit, this is a fun one. The first of a handful of top 25 matchups this week. We're going to scroll around a little bit, get down here. Number 23, Cincinnati. Number 19, Arkansas. We're showing Arkansas going to win this one outright about 59% of the time. And they have an interesting offense. KJ Jefferson is back, the Hulk-sized quarterback, 6'3", 245 pounds, but also a better passer than I think he's given credit for. 67% completion percentage last year, 21 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, and just not someone you want to see coming at you in the open field. He loses Traylon Burks, a first-round pick of the Tennessee Titans, but gets a couple of interesting transfers over the last couple of years. This year, former blue chipper Jaden Hazelwood comes in from Oklahoma. And last year, they got Matt Landers in from Toledo, guy who started slowly, but seemed to figure things out, seemed to start to gel with Jefferson at the end of the season. And I think we can only expect more and more from Landers this year. Hazelton's the wild card. The guy is an elite prospect if he puts it all together, but inconsistency plagued him at Oklahoma. For Cincy, it all comes down to who their quarterback's going to be. Who is going to replace Desmond Ridder? We know this team is one of the best offenses in college football last year. We know what they were. We know how they fought. We know where they got. But Desmond Ridder is now an Atlanta Falcon. Is it going to be Ben Bryant, who was Ridder's backup for a while, left, came back, and now he's in the race? Or will it be former blue chip quarterback prospect Evan Prater? It's not, Luke Fickell is in no rush to announce who their quarterback is going to be, but it's hard for me to think that Prater would have stayed if he didn't think he was going to be the starter. This guy is incredibly talented. Could do Desmond Ritter-ish things at Cincinnati. Not to take anything away from Ben Bryant, who has been more of a game manager than anything else, but Prater has the upside. I imagine he's still there for a reason. Fickell doesn't want to announce anything because why the hell would he? There's no competitive advantage in that. But my expectation is Evan Prater gets the first swing at this. We're showing Arkansas is going to cover about 62% of the time. I don't know if I'm that comfortable. The -7 right now at Bovada doesn't represent great value at only -105 there, pardon me. So we're just going to sit with the money line. We're going to take Arkansas money line -250. Our parlay 2 picks in is going to go up to a +162. I assure you it's going to get higher than that before we're all said and done here. Another top 25 matchup coming up next right here. Number 11, Oregon. Number 3, Georgia. And ladies and gents, I don't think this one's going to be as competitive as the rankings would suggest. We're showing Georgia's going to win about 91.5% of the time here. For Oregon, they just lost a lot. They lost a lot. Their former starting quarterback, Anthony Brown, is now a Baltimore Raven. Their top 2 rushers last year, including Anthony Brown, have moved on. Their leading rusher, and as did CJ Verdell, their number 4 rusher last year. Leading returning rusher for a team that's really wants to run the ball is sophomore running back Byron Cardwell. We do expect a breakout season from Cardwell, but I don't know that it's going to be enough to propel this team into the lofty heights that they're accustomed. 61 carries for 417 yards, 6.8 a clip, and 3 scores in limited duty for Cardwell last season for Oregon. Now, Georgia, I know what you're thinking. This team, they lost a ton. They lost a ton, right? How can they compete with everything they lost, with the number 1 pick in the draft, and Jordan Davis, and Nakobe Dean, and Lewis Seen, Channing Tindall, Quay Walker, Darian Kendrick, and so on, and so on, and so on? Well, there's just a new group waiting to take their place. And I would argue that their best defensive lineman last year is still wearing a Bulldogs jersey, and Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle, who has a shot to be a top 2 or 3 pick in the 2023 draft. You also have Nolan Smith still there, the outstanding edge rusher. And you have Keely Ringo at the cornerback position. And those 3 guys, you're talking about, 3 potential top 12 to 15 picks if everything breaks right. The team is still loaded to bear. It's just going to be it's going to come down to what happens at the quarterback position. Stetson Bennett's back for what seems like his age 27 season this year. He was adequate, the definition of a game manager, 64.5%, 2,862 yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Is there a leap to be taken from Bennett? Probably not. We watched JT Daniels play last night, his former backup, as a matter of fact. So you know what you're going to get. You're going to get consistency. There's not going to be a lot of 450-yard games from Stenson. That's fine. This team doesn't need that. Their defense is going to carry them once again. Last year, arguably the best defense in the country. We're showing it's about a 50-50 split. in terms of Oregon covering the Oregon with the plus 16.5 at Bovada. It's a big line. There's no doubt about that. I'm just not one of those people who believes that this game is going to be as competitive as that. I don't think it's a split. I think this is an obvious Georgia win. I think Georgia's going to win by a decent amount. I think there's a little bit of underestimating what the offense will do because Stetson Bennett's a bit of a boring quarterback. But we're going to take the cover. Georgia minus 16.5, minus 110. That is going to take our parlay 3 picks in from 162 to plus 400. All right, we're getting somewhere. Plus 400 at Bovada after 3 parlays. Well, 3 picks of our parlay. Moving on. We have got BYU and South Florida. Let's find this game. It is at 4 p.m. And that is going to be... I'm blind, so excuse me. It's going to be right here. BYU's giving 11.5 points, obviously, as the overwhelming favorite. We're showing that BYU is going to win this one about 64% of the time. For BYU, this is just a matter of, this is a powerful offense. And I don't think it's going to be slowing down anytime soon. 31st in the nation in passing yards last year at 264. 38th in rushing yards at 189. Didn't put the ball in the end zone as much as you would think. For being a consistent top 35 to 40 team, both in passing and rushing yards, 77th in points scored. So obviously left some meat on the bone there. The player to watch for them is going to be quarterback Jaron Hall, a guy who people really like as a potential sleeper who could turn into a household name this year. He's a junior, 63.9% completion percentage last year for 2,583 yards, 20 scores to just 5 interceptions. Expect a big jump in the stock of Jaron Hall this year. People say maybe a first rounder. I think that's a little bit much. USF is just, well, they're fine. They're ordinary. They were a team led by their defense last year, 15th in the nation at giving up 34.7 points per game. The offense isn't very good. The passing game is below average. The running game is adequate. I don't see how they potentially have the horses to keep up with a team like BYU, an offense that high powered. We're showing BYU is going to cover this one about 66% of the time, and I have a hard time not believing that. Something about that 11.5 scares me, and maybe we'll look back at this next week and point to this as one of our issues. So if you do want to play it safe, go with the money line here, minus 415. I'm going to take the cover. I think BYU is at least 12 points better than South Florida right now. So with now 4 picks into our parlay, we are at plus 854 at Bovada. Putting the money up, we're getting there. Up next, we have got Rice versus USC. A couple of these are not going to be super competitive. Spoilers. We're showing USC is going to win it about 96.1% of the time. For Rice, look, they don't stop people from scoring, and they were 228th in college football in points for last season. I don't think we need to say much more than that. USC is fascinating, however. They bring in just a ton. The team looks completely different than it did a year ago. Lincoln Riley, now the head coach. Caleb Williams, the former Oklahoma star freshman, now a USC star sophomore. They bring in maybe the most productive returning receiver in the nation and former Pitt wide receiver Jordan Addison. Their offense is going to be there. Caleb Williams, when he took over at Oklahoma last year, he just brought a spark to that team. 211 passing attempts, 64.5% completion percentage, 1,912 yards on the ground, 21 through the air, 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Also a major threat to run the ball. He's a Heisman Trophy candidate. You know who Caleb Williams is, and he's just going to get better and better and better. I was thinking about this, and it's very rare that someone is going to get to play in a Lincoln Riley offense and learn the nuances over the course of potentially 3 or 4 years. It just doesn't happen because that offense is such a star maker in its own right. You tend to have one and dones. Caleb Williams is going to basically he's getting a masterclass in this Lincoln Riley offense. And that tends to spell a lot of success at the college level. We're showing USC is going to cover this. By the way, the this in this situation is they're giving 32.5 points at Bovada right now. Gigantic number. And we're showing they're going to cover about 98% of the time. I would even look into an alternate line here, honestly. I think USC is going to win by more than this. This might be a 40-point win. This might be a 42-point win. So this, for me, an easy cover for USC. Our parlay goes from $850 to plus $1,721, $100. Wins you $1,700 with 5 picks in our parlay. Up next, we have got the Troy Trojans taking on the number 21 ranked Ole Miss Rebels. Had to throw this one in for my underdog colleague Matt Crone. We're showing that Ole Miss is going to win this one about 89% of the time outright. For Troy, a team that was kind of a passing team last year, were pretty good in terms of their defense. Don't know that they have the horses at this point. I don't know. Their quarterback last year, Gunnar Watson, comes back for his junior year, was adequate, but quite frankly, it was a step down from the prior year for him. In 2020, 2,141 yards passing. Last year, that drops to 1,600. The completion percentage dropped from 70 to 61. You wonder what's going on when you see numbers like that. You don't tend to see regression from those early seasons with a quarterback taking over. Ole Miss lost a ton. Let's get this out there on Front Street. Their starting quarterback is now a Carolina Panther. Their top 2 running backs, Jerry Neely and Snoop Connor, are in the NFL. Their 2 leading receivers, Ontario Drummond and Braylon Sanders, are in the NFL. But Jackson Dart comes over from USC, the former 5-star prospect. They're going to be able to move the ball. That's what they do at Ole Miss, and I think that's going to continue here. We're showing an Ole Miss cover about 98% of the time, and that's minus 21.5 at Bovada. Another gigantic line. This is a question, right? Do we believe in the Troy defense enough? But the money line is awfully boring. The money line's minus 1,800. That's not doing anything for us. We're here to make money. We're here to take chances. We're here to make people rich. Yeah, we're going to take Mississippi minus 21.5 for minus 110. That's going to take our parlay from plus 1721 to plus 3377. Finally, some real money. We're talking about real money now. And we move on to what should be, I would think, at least what the media wants to be the game of the week. That would be right here, number 5 Notre Dame versus number 2 Ohio State. We're seeing about an 83.5% chance that Ohio State wins this one outright. And, man, for Notre Dame, it all comes down to new head coach Marcus Freeman. They had quite a few changes. They lost some players. Avery Davis, a guy who they expected to be one of their leading receivers, was lost in August in practice to a torn ACL. They do have some weapons for quarterback Tyler Buckner, but Buckner, in his own right, incredibly unproven. And he gets to play Ohio State. Ohio State is not missing much. People talk about everything that they had last year and all of those early draft picks. Well, they returned their leading quarterback in terms of passing yards, in terms of anything. They returned their top 2 running backs. They returned their leading receiver. Yeah, it wasn't Garrett Wilson. It wasn't Chris Olave. It was Jackson. I feel like somehow Jackson has been overlooked, and people think that bowl game that he had when Wilson and Olave didn't play was some sort of mirage. He had 600 more yards receiving than the number 2 player on that team that was Garrett Wilson. He had almost 700 yards more than Chris Olave. He wasn't that far off at 1,600, matching the total of both Wilson and Olave. He's that good. He is a top 15 to 20 pick in the draft next year. It seems like the floor. CJ Stroud, a guy who has a chance to be the number 1 pick in the draft, comes back after throwing for 4,435 yards, including 44 touchdowns to 6 picks in that freshman season. He's a Heisman contender, a contender to be the number 1 pick. And guess what? This is going to be another gigantic season. We're showing that Ohio State is going to cover the 17 about 88% of the time. And I think that is going to be where we're at. The money line is a boring minus 800 at Bovada, so that doesn't tempt me to go in that direction. We're going to take the cover. Ohio State minus 17, minus 110. It's going to take our parlay from 33.77 to plus 65.37 at Bovada. Yeah, we're going to get this thing. We're going to get this thing into 5 figures. We're going to talk about a $10,000 payout for your $100 bet. And we're going to do that with our final game of the week. You know, this one's also not going to be a nail biter, despite the fact that Utah State did get the chance to play already, which does tend to be something of a competitive advantage. They won 31-20 over UConn in week 0. Don't think it's going to matter too much. Spoilers, and I apologize for that. Gigantic line at Bovada, by the way. This is going to be the biggest line we've talked about all day with these games. Alabama is giving 42 points. They're giving 42 points. And what's crazy to me, too, they're expected to win by 42 or more here, and the over-under is only 62.5, which means Alabama is going to have to be responsible for doing most of that scoring. We'll talk about we'll talk about the pick in just a second. Let's talk about Utah State. Like I said, they have had the opportunity to play already. They have the win. They are officially in first place in the Mountain West. Enjoy that while it lasts. Big game from their quarterback Logan Bonner, 281 yards and 3 touchdowns. Calvin Tyler Jr. led the way rushing 161 yards on 33 carries last week. No scores. Passing is a passing offense. Again, don't think it's going to matter a ton. We talked about the success that CJ Stroud had last year as a freshman. Well, that was usurped by what Bryce Young did as a freshman at Alabama. Did last year at Alabama. 366 completions on 547 attempts for 66.9%, 4,872 yards passing, 47 touchdowns to 7 picks. Alabama is a team that really likes to run the ball, and they lose Brian Robinson to the NFL. Trey Sanders comes back. He was their number 2 rusher last year. Roydell Williams comes back, their number 3 rusher last year. But really, it was Robinson's team. They're going to have to figure out what to do at the wide receiver position, too, as Jalen Williams and John Mechie are playing professionally. But this is a team that restocks. It's not a rebuild type thing. It's a reload type thing, and that's going to be exactly what happens for Alabama this year. We're showing they're going to cover the spread. Again, 42 points at Bovada. They're going to cover that 42 points about 99% of the time. This is another one where if you have the guts to do it, you want to make a little bit extra money, go into the alternate lines, take Alabama minus a little bit more, maybe minus 45. That would be interesting. I don't want to mess too much with this because the alternate lines tend to screw up the spread a little bit. But that's just the first half. Do we have an alternate line for the full game? I'm not seeing it anyway. So regardless, no big deal. We get back to where we were. We get back to this Alabama game. And it's going to be a bloodbath. It's probably the nicest way to put it. Absolutely on Alabama to cover the 42. It's a 50-point win, and I think it's a pretty easy one. Probably going to hit this over as well, if I had to guess. And maybe we'll take that. Why the heck not? We like our bonus picks. So we'll take Alabama to cover the 42, which takes our parlay from 6,500 to 12,573. And then bonus points here. Let's take the over at 62.5, minus 105 at Bovada there. And that is going to jump our parlay up even more. Final parlay, 8 picks plus a bonus over under, goes from 12,572 it broke. So forget that. Our official parlay 8 picks is plus 12,572, $100 wins you 12.5 grand, and it's locks like they are every single week. All right, that's going to be it for this week's episode of In Pursuit of a Parlay. I have been Chris Horwedel. Thank you for listening. Like I said, like, subscribe, wherever the heck you're at. Reach out, be in touch. Let's have this be a community. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, for engaging, and we will see you next time.